we're in these projects and they're just these beautiful pastel colors, and it's just such overwhelming beauty, and yet such horrible things are happening. And there was a point where I felt like to have taken that beauty away from the neighborhood, to have done things to alter it, it would have been immoral, because that's, we're trying to make something that was truthful to where we grew up.
Hey, I'm Wilbert L. Cooper. Welcome to Vice Talks Film. I'm here with Barry Jenkins today, the director of Moonlight, an incredible film that's a coming-of-age story following a young man as he explores his sexual identity and he struggles through life in the ghetto.
What you looking at me like that for? What, man? Come on, you just drove down here? Yeah. Who is you, Chiron? For a long time, I try not to remember. Try to forget all those times.
At some point, you gotta decide for yourself who you gonna be. Can't let nobody make that decision for you.
What's wrong?
You good?
No, I done seen good, and you ain't it.
Remember the last time I saw you?
You're my only, and I'm your only. No, you gon' listen.
To who, Ma? Huh? To you? Who is you, man? I ain't seen you in like a decade. It's not what I expected. But what did you expect?
Well, Barry, you made a phenomenal film.
Thank you.
After seeing it in the theater, I was just kind of speechless for a minute, very meditative. What is it like to take a script like that is very much about coming to terms with your sexuality and your identity as a gay man, a gay black man? What was that like for you, adapting it and putting your voice and your mindset inside of that story?
I'm a straight man who has, I feel like, compassion and empathy. And yet that empathy is passive, unless you're creating things, to try to address these issues, to try to find solutions for the mistreatment that certain people undergo just for being who they are. I like to say I approach the story from a place of empathy, active empathy. If you're a writer and you're not writing actively about LGBTQ causes, then how much of an ally are you?
One of the strengths of this movie is the acting. It seems like everybody just brought their A game. It was incredible to watch all the different performances. What was the approach that you went in to casting, especially considering the fact that for some roles you had to cast 3 people?
When I decided the structure that I was going to tell the story in these 3 chapters, right away I was like, okay, but we're not going to try to do like a Benjamin Button where we're casting the same person, we're going to age him up and age him down. One, we couldn't afford to do that, but also 2, I think thematically part of the point of the film was how the world can radically change these young men, based on how they're responding to their environment, based on the lack of nurturing or the application of the wrong kind of nurturing, this sort of hyper masculinity. And so I wanted, the character to become a different person. We were going to cast different people to play this guy. We weren't looking for people who looked like one another. I was looking for the same feeling. There's this book by Walter Murch called In the Blink of an Eye. It's like one of the first books I read in film school. And it basically just talks about how in cinema, the eyes are the window into the soul. So I thought if I could find actors who, if you look in their eyes, you see the same soul, you'll believe that there's a continuum, of this guy going on this journey. So that was part of it.
Can you tell me a little bit about your personal experience and what it was like growing up in Miami and how that connects to the story?
I grew up, it was kind of rough, but it was a very beautiful place, And so I think when you were a kid, you contextualize your surroundings, and we were always surrounded by this very lush green grass and these beautiful golden sunsets. Miami's a very alive place. I think of it, Ta-Nehisi Coates has this book called The Beautiful Struggle. I think of my childhood as The Beautiful Struggle. But yeah, I grew up in, I think, an awesome neighborhood where some very dark things happen.
Focusing in on some of the different performances, I'm really interested in Paula, Naomie Harris, and sort of how her involvement came into this film, and what the struggles might have been for you as a director, directing someone who's playing a mother who's suffering addiction, and you having had a childhood where your mother was suffering from addiction.
You're my only, and I'm your only.
Naomie is the only actor who's in all 3 chapters of the film, despite the conceit the formal conceit that we were going to tell the story in these 3 chapters and have different actors. I knew there needed to be one actor who went through the whole thing, and it felt appropriate that be the mother figure, this character Paula. I get it, a mom who's addicted to crack cocaine is not a positive image, but we had all these conversations about it, and once I explained to her how personal it was, she kind of saw through my relationship with my mom this place where she could understand the character better and where she could have empathy for someone who might succumb to that kind of ordeal. I will say, directing her, I'm a cool customer on set, With Naomie, it was different, man. It was tough because you're watching somebody basically who now starts to look like your mom and sound like your mom. Because she's this posh English woman, and yet you call action, and now she sounds like she grew up on 69th Street. And it's like, it was intense, but we got through it. It was one of the really amazing things that I feel like Terrell did for me in writing this play, which was, it was just far enough removed for me, the things he went through with his mom, that I finally felt comfortable, because I've never tackled this in my work.
You mentioned the play in Moonlight, Black Boys Look Blue. How did you come across that play, and then what was it like adapting it for the screen?
It was cool. There was this group of kids in Miami, this woman, Jillian Mayer, Lucas Leyva, they knew Terrell, and they also knew me. Terrell gave them in Moonlight, and they read it and said, well, Barry, this is not about you, but it's about you. And once I read it and I saw the same things they saw, they sort of put Terrell and I together, and that was how the whole thing kind of took off.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about the music, because one of the things that struck me with the film
I love talking about the music, bro.
Yeah, it was so cool because I read, there was so many like soul songs that I recognized that were sampled by hip hop.
Yeah.
But then I heard them in the original version, and it gave the film an almost kind of timeless vibe to me. I was wondering, like, what was going through your mind as you were selecting the songs, and was that something that you were trying to do? Because that's the impact it had on me.
It's funny, the song you're talking about, the Aretha Franklin song, One Step Ahead, people miss it, but it also plays in the first story. When he first comes home from the swimming lesson, Paul is playing it in the living room, and then it plays again on the jukebox later. And the song is just as home, playing with his mom playing it, as it is with him and Kevin sharing it in the diner later. And so the second song that plays in the diner, this song by Barbara Lewis, Hello Stranger, the lyrics are literally written in the screenplay. And you're not supposed to do this, but when we filmed the scene, the song is literally playing in the room on the jukebox. You're not supposed to do that, but I'm planting a flag. This song is in the film. Aside from that, we talked about this idea of Miami being this very hard place, but that's full of beauty, and the sort of like juxtaposition, and I think the synchronicity of telling a story and this sort of like lush imagery that also deals with these very heavy issues. I want the same thing with the music. My voice as a filmmaker has sort of been nurtured by watching a lot of like art house cinema, like French New Wave, Asian New Wave. And my favorite filmmaker is this woman, Claire Denis, and Claire uses score in her films very, very liberally, despite the fact that she's thought of as like a very austere filmmaker. And so I want an orchestral score in Moonlight, despite the fact that when we see films set in places like Liberty City, when we watch hood films, we don't think of them as having chamber orchestra scores. And so I said to the composer, this guy Nick Patel, well, we're also going to have chopped and screwed music. And so I told him what chopped and screwed was, and how by the third story there's going to be a lot of chopped and screwed music in the film. And he said, well, you know what we should do, man? We should chop and screw the orchestra. And I was like, yes, we should chop and screw the orchestra. And so as the film goes on, you're watching this film with these beautiful players, this guy on violin, this dude Tim Fain, just like playing his heart out, in a chamber group. And then Nick is taking those instruments and using the same principles as DJ Screw and chopping and screwing them.
Wow.
And so the deepest bass you feel in this film is
Yeah.
not coming out of the back of the trunk when he plays Classic Man. You know, it's somebody at the Philharmonic playing like a double bass cello.
Wow.
And Nick did a great job of taking these art house principles, you know, of chamber music and also getting it to a point where you could feel it like in your chest. So I was really happy with the music, man.
Do you feel like we're in a special or important moment right now in terms of Black filmmaking or you know, Black directors, Black auteurs being able to have more control and being able to put forth ideas and images that are unique to our community or our experience?
I think we are, but there's two sides of that. One, I think the fact that we're seeing this work right now means we probably were in that moment a few years ago. You know, I started this project 3 years ago with my partners, Plan B A24, and so it's great to have the spotlight on diversity in film right now, but the actual work was done before anybody was talking about these things, you know, with the people who decided to support this project and, you know, people like Ryan who made Fruitvale of his own will, you know, and Ava with Middle of Nowhere. And so I think we're seeing the fruits of that, you know, but there are so many people who aren't being celebrated, who aren't, you know, in the public eye, you know, who helped, you know, bring all these things to fruition. I think also too, you know, filmmaking, I grew up very, very poor. And there was a time when you could only make films, you know, on film with this very big equipment, you know, for a certain amount of money. And I think now the democratization of the process is bringing some of those tools further and further away from the power structures. People say, oh, this is a story we don't see very often, it's not told very often. And the way I spin that is, you know, people like myself and Terrell, you know, we grew up dirt poor with mothers who were ravaged by addiction. You know, those people don't usually get to the point where, you know, they're showing movies at the you know, the Walter Reed Theater, the New York Film Festival, or Terrell having plays at the Public, you know. And the audiences that are responding to this film aren't necessarily the people who are on the screen, and yet they're seeing these people. I think now seeing a film like this, based on the hugs that I'm getting from people, the way I have to literally hold people after screenings of this film in places like Telluride, Colorado, I think now it's like, oh, okay, I can see that person.
Well, hey, you know, thank you so much, man. This film is a really inspiration to
My pleasure,
me,
man.
and thanks for taking the time to
Thank
talk
you,
and
man.
break it down.
Appreciate it, man.
Yeah,
Appreciate
it's great
it.
to talk to you.